Hey, it's your boy, Jimmy B. Listen, the sound's all over the place in this podcast, which I'm very, very disappointed about. And it's basically there was a problem with the audio recording, so I've had to take mine and Matt's audio from the camera, the DSLR audio, and I tried to clean it up, but that just made the audio quality even worse. So apologies. There's always next time. I mean, we're yet to have good audio on this podcast, but stick with me. But anyway, Alex says a lot of interesting stuff, so you should probably listen. Thanks. Sorry everyone. Thanks. Bye. Hello and welcome to Complete Load of Podcast, the Completed It Mate podcast. I'm James Buckley.
I'm Matt. Do people actually care about my full name? Probably not.
They might do. They might want to look you up and stuff.
Oh, you might find me on Twitter, yeah. Matt Whiston.
There you go.
Yeah.
Today we have another guest. Turns out, because we discovered in the last podcast that the world is flat,
Yes.
but we've made another new discovery, this podcast, that the Earth is not flat.
What?
It's a sphere. It's spherical.
No.
Because we've gone 360 almost. Because I thought the world was spherical, then it was flat. Now it's gone back to spherical. Not sure what shape it will be next week, but stay tuned for that. We've got a guest called Alex O'Connor, who's better known as the Cosmic Skeptic, and he's going to tell us why the Earth isn't flat.
I don't know how he's going to do that. It's going to be really difficult for him to prove that one.
First things I need to talk about is that we get a lot of complaints about the sound in this podcast. I've been meaning to bring this up for ages.
What's the excuse?
Right, it's not my fault.
Is it my fault?
It's not your fault either.
Okay.
Because remember, the apparently the podcast and the audio on if you listen to the audio is okay, you said.
I think so, yeah. Well, I think if you mixed it better, we wouldn't have the problem. So I think there's peaks of volume get sort of reduced.
I mix it so that it all comes out in like a nice thick line instead of like going all over the place. I'm telling you, I don't know what the problem with the audio is. I'm starting to fucking hate YouTube, I know that much.
What? Because of the moaning about the audio?
Yeah, let me do that quickly. It's bugging me. It's putting me off my stroke.
You look a little bit dangling, you
just don't like it being taut on the wire. You ruin your wire that way. I like it dangly.
No one wants to snap their wire.
Exactly.
During a podcast.
I don't really know what's going on. I made the last podcast louder, I think, but I think the quality of the audio goes down if you do that.
Yeah, no,
sounds fine in my head.
What's happening
Not
is...
in my head, I mean in my headphones when I'm editing it.
You shouldn't make it all loud. It needs to be like a normal level, but I think what happens is there's a peak, someone will knock the microphone or something, there'll be a peak in there somewhere, and then YouTube's taking that as too loud and reducing all of the volume, I think is what's happening.
That's what I'm going to go with. You been up to much since the last podcast?
No, mate, obviously not.
Still just... eating nothing and
basically
going out.
Yeah, basically. To be fair, I have been going out a bit more.
Oh, you have?
I got bored of seriously bored of like not going out. You know,
what's out? What's so great about
just
out?
the pub, but I don't know, it's just...
What pub do you go to?
Pubs up London. Nothing about up London.
Oh, okay.
Just after work or whatever.
Right.
No, it's not one of those. It just happens to be... I just happen to work up London. It's easy to roll out of work and go into a pub. One of those. Oh, trendy pub, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, hipster. No, I'm not a hipster.
Well, the hair.
I've got the hair. I got all the makings of a good hipster.
Yeah.
But just none of the suave, pretentious.
Suave? Don't say suave.
Well, it's faux suave, maybe.
Yeah, I guess so. So that's it. Just
pub.
Fair enough.
What have you been
That's
doing?
a good time to spend. That's a good way to spend your time.
Yeah.
Twitching, mate. Twitching.
Yeah, I seen you. Luckily, you actually do it around lunchtime, so I do watch most of the ones you do.
Yes. Yeah. But we're now a Twitch partner, so and it's been really great. It's been really fun. The thing that I've discovered recently is that this YouTube channel is dying, and that YouTube doesn't like live broadcasts of people playing video games, and neither do people who watch YouTube like that. So I need to reevaluate what's happening with this channel and decide. Sorry, some more burps. I tried to get them all out before.
It's a ham roll.
And decide what direction we're going to take. But if you want to carry on watching me play video games live in the afternoon, then make sure you head over to twitch.tv/completeditmate and either follow, or if you subscribe, you can play video games with me, which might be good. It might not be worth it. I'll leave that for you to decide. Oh yeah, fence news. I might do its own jingle.
Oh, go on then.
So fence news. Here's the update on the old fence. It's that dog again. Here's the update on the old fence. So I've got someone coming round to do it June the 2nd. It was the earliest I could get someone to do it. As you know. Okay. I've been trying to find someone to do it, and it's taken me a while to find someone who seems like they can do it.
At least 2 months.
Yeah. In that time, the neighbours fixed there's still a bit of the back of my fence that needs fixed, but they've fixed their section.
Yeah, so you was worried about, you didn't know who owned part of the fence or whether it was your responsibility. So
neighbours just gone. He's obviously too lazy to do it, which isn't the case. And just went forward and got it done herself.
He's mugged you right off, mate.
It's a woman.
She's mugged you right off.
She hasn't mugged me off at all.
She's grabbed this ball by the horns and done something about it. You've been faffing about, going, "Oh, they didn't call me back."
Right. Well, that's it. I mean, I have been faffing about, sure, but why did she come to me and say fix the fence?
She did say that.
Yeah, she came to me and said, "Oh, the fence is broken, by the way." And then it was a few weeks later when I went, well, "Hang on a minute, that fence is in the middle of both our gardens. Whose responsibility is it?" And during that time of me thinking, she's got it fixed. So half the fence has been fixed. That was fence news. Should we get straight into our guest? Should we say hello to Alex O'Connor, Cosmic Skeptic?
Yeah, let's have a good old chinwag with him, and we can talk about other drivel afterwards.
Cool. Alex O'Connor is a student, podcaster and YouTuber from Oxford. You should check out his YouTube channel, The Cosmic Skeptic, where he talks about certain debates and topics such as, the first time I did this was better. By the way, we're doing this again because I forgot to press record on Alex. He talks about certain debates and topics such as religion versus science and the true meaning of morality. It's one of my favourite channels. It talks about intellectual stuff, but in an accessible way, and it's very, very interesting, and also I come away understanding it, which is a gift. What Alex has got. Welcome again. It's such a shame
you gave such an amazing amazing overview of your thoughts of my channel in the last introduction, and it's all lost to time now.
Yeah. Well, it's just I'm enthusiasm. I've got that. Do you ever sort of play a video game or something and spend hours on it, and then it crashes, and then you just never go back?
I know the feeling.
I'm not doing that again.
I was just saying to you, I did the same thing with my podcast episode with Matt Dillahunty. I just forgot to hit record, and you just have to kind of stop mid because you're like in the middle of a point, and you're just like, I can't let you finish this because I know that it's not going anywhere. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Just stop. We need to restart.
I'm sorry about that, but yeah, no, Alex, the Cosmic Skeptic is one of my favourite YouTube channels, because you talk about very sort of intellectual, philosophical questions, touch on religion, you touch on certain conspiracies, certain way of thinking, and what you've got is this gift to be able to present it in a way that's entertaining and interesting and also accessible. And like I was telling you the first time that we did this, that I'm not sure, what your future plans are. You're at university at the moment, but you definitely have the Brian Cox sort of aura around you. This sort of nice, friendly guy that is fun to listen to, talking to stuff that maybe if someone tried to talk to me when I was at school, I would go, "Oh, that's boring. Why do you want to talk about that?" But it's actually not. It's the absolute complete opposite. So there's definitely like a future for you in the media or something like that, if you ever want.
Well, it's kind of you to say. I appreciate it. Brian Cox is an interesting comparison. It means a lot that you think I'm able to convey information in the same way that he does. I'm just kind of trying to imagine, because I'd like to do more public debating and things like that, and I'm trying to imagine Brian Cox in a like fierce debate, and I don't know if he's quite got the oomph.
No.
Although I have seen him do it. He debated somebody. I think it was on like Q&A, that Australian show. He was talking about climate change or something, and he was essentially debating this climate change skeptic, and the guy's like saying, you don't have any evidence for this, and Brian just kind of pulls out. I brought the data, and he's got like graphs and data in his hand, and the audience kind of goes wild. So I think he could do well in a debate situation, maybe. I'd like to see him put in a formal debate, see how he does.
Well, you're both. I guess the comparison is that you both
good communicators.
Good communicators, but also
thanks a lot.
Facts and something that you do on your channel that I'm sure I've heard you talk about is that facts change, and you're not married to a certain way of thinking. Or you are at that point until something else comes along, scientifically proven, that changes what you've learnt before, and you're happy to go along with that and go along with that narrative, which is why you're going to tell us why the Earth is flat.
I can tell you why it's flat if you want, but I'd probably rather say why it's a globe. One clarification I'd make is that I don't think facts change. What changes is our understanding of them, of course. And that's the point, right? It's that there are facts to be known about the universe and the way things work, and the method of inquiry that we use to get there is science. And you have to be open if you're a science enthusiast, and certainly if you're a scientist, you have to be open to the idea that the facts that you think you know are not in fact facts. If that makes sense. And one area in which that would be absolutely mind-blowing would be the shape of the Earth, because...
Well, that's what I said to you, didn't I? I think at the end of the podcast, our last podcast, I basically said that if a scientist, an actual scientist, a bloke that isn't a flat earther, said, I've got it, this is it, this is the proof. I don't think there would be a cover-up. I think it would be one of the biggest scientific discoveries ever, and that science would go for it if it happened to be. I don't think that science is trying to cover up
there's not an agenda to science, is there?
No,
it's just the
that's
pursuit of truth.
And people will claim that there's an agenda to science. There's not. I mean, scientists have agendas, but science does not. Even if you are a reputable scientific organization, investigating some kind of claim and doing it with a bias and trying to prove a conclusion that you've already presupposed, then you're simply not doing science, right? So you can't. It doesn't make any sense to say that science has an agenda, because if you have an agenda, then you're not doing science. By nature of doing science, it has to be genuine, open, empirical inquiry. And like you say, one of the biggest questions here is, why do this? What's any kind of conspiracy theory, and this must be a conspiracy theory because it necessitates a conspiratorial, the world leaders and everybody who would have the ability to know about this kind of thing conspiring to uphold this lie. So it must be a conspiracy theory. I don't understand with this conspiracy theory what the benefit is. People will say, like, I remember I heard Mark Sargent say on your podcast that it's about power. It's about retaining power. You know, if this discovery was made in the 50s, and the US and the USSR realized that if the Earth is flat, firstly, what's the Earth being flat really going to do in terms of power structures? Secondly, when was it that people started to think that instead of the Earth being flat, it might have been a globe, and that, for instance, when did humanity start realizing that our planet might not be at the center of the solar system? Well, it was around the time that religious authorities were the authorities. There was no other authority that existed. So, if what you see here in back then is a situation where somebody discovers that the Earth is a globe and it is not the center of the universe, and the religious authorities try to cover it up. They were persecuting them. They were throwing people in jail and burning them at the stake, or threatening to do so because of these views.
Yeah.
I mean, so he was certainly persecuted. And what happens now in a situation where people are beginning to think the Earth might be flat? Absolutely nothing. If anything, these views are being promulgated like never before. Mark Sargent even pointed out, look how easy we have it. Google's doing us a massive favor. Well, is that not evidence of the fact that nobody's trying to cover this up? Nobody's trying to suppress this information. Like, if you want to say it, you can shout it from a rooftop, and you can have it all over Google and all over YouTube. You can get a documentary on Netflix, for goodness sake. Nobody's trying to cover this up. And why would they be doing so? You know, there's just no good reason for it.
It's a really good point. Why hasn't Mark Sargent been silenced?
But you wouldn't even need to burn him at the stake. You just need to suppress him in the Google searches. Like, why have we heard of Mark Sargent? The only possible reason we've heard of Mark Sargent is because of the fact that he's showing up in search engines and he's showing up in documentaries and people are hiring him. And the only reason people are hiring him for documentaries is because they've shown up in their search engines. It would be so easy, like unthinkably easy, for Google to just quietly turn that off, and they just haven't done so.
He did say one, power, because I asked him who's benefiting from this, but then in the same breath, he also said that he thinks that the government is slowly teasing this out to get us used to it. Yeah, so it's either one or the other, isn't it?
But it doesn't matter how slowly it happens. The point is that the reason why we can't allow people to know that the Earth is actually flat is because that undermines the authority of the government. Well, whether that happens slowly or quickly, that's going to be a problem. Like, if you slowly start getting people kind of switched on to the idea that the Earth might be flat, then they suddenly realize that the government's known this all along. If the government turns around and says, look, we've made a discovery that the Earth is flat, it'd be mass hysteria, of course, but there's no undermining of the power of the government. In fact, if anything, it's a testament to their transparency. However, if the government slowly lets people work it out for themselves, then people are going to feel like, well, we've worked this out against the government, and we know the government's been lying to us, and we know that they've been lying to us for a period of time because they must have known this for a long time and they didn't tell us immediately. That more undermines the power. That more undermines the idea that people will trust in the government. So if they're not going to immediately tell people, then they're not going to want them to know at all. That would be even worse. So any argument in along those lines seems to just again be an example of ad hoc reasoning. It's like you've got a problem here, and instead of coming up with an overarching theory that explains the entire flat Earth, you take a singular issue and you say, well, what could possibly explain this? The problem is that explanation doesn't fit with the rest of the story.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Well, we've got Mark's top 5 arguments, which we're going to go through you with. But first, can you tell people in a better way than me a little bit more about your?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So.
Brackets
yeah, the YouTube channel is called Cosmic Skeptic. It's I like to call it a philosophical YouTube channel now. That's in part because I don't want to just be known as a YouTube atheist, but also in part because when I'm kind of at a family gathering and somebody I haven't seen in a while comes up to me with a big cross around their neck and they say, oh, what do you do these days? I don't want to tell them that I'm an atheist YouTuber. So it's a philosophy channel now. And...
Well, it is because it's not. I mean, especially of late, there's not been huge amounts sort of dedicated to religion.
Well, there's not been huge amounts, I'm afraid. The content has been a little bit lacking because I've been kind of focusing on the studies, but I've been putting out podcast episodes. So you're right, actually, because I've been doing mainly podcast episodes. We had a discussion with Michael Shermer about the nature of death. We have my friend Stephen Woodford. We talked about objective morality. I've got episodes coming out talking about secularism and animal rights and all sorts of things. So now it definitely is more of a philosophy channel.
Yeah.
At the moment, the channel has been quite engaged with animal rights and veganism. That's something that's kind of sprung out of nowhere, but become a real interest to my viewers and myself after I made a video on the topic. And it's kind of come up in a bunch of podcasts as well. So it's really just a breadth of philosophical issues that we talk about. And I'm afraid, like, I can't tell you more than that. People tell me to explain about the channel, and I say, well, I talk about philosophy. I mean, people must wonder, well, why, what a lot of people talk about philosophy, what's different about your channel? I have no idea. I really don't know. But whatever it is, because I've been granted this audience, and luckily so, I now I'm in an opportunity to reach out to really interesting guests and to travel to interesting places, and so now the channel, it makes sense to come to the channel because I have the opportunities to speak to these kinds of people and do these kinds of things. But outside of that, it is really just me talking about what I think about certain philosophical issues.
Yeah, and I think the success of the channel is, as obviously, you have a lot to do with it because of how you present yourself and how you come across, and it's, first of all, it's all super interesting and thought-provoking, and I assume that's what the goal is to make people think, and it definitely does give you stuff to think about. But also, just the way you do present it, it just makes for good, interesting viewing. It's not, like I mentioned earlier, there really isn't that many people that can do that, because a lot of the stuff that you talk about could possibly just lose a lot of people that want to, I don't know, watch Love Island or something. I don't know. And but you're very engaging. You keep.
Well,
with you.
I would say thanks. Although one of the things that I've promulgated on the channel is that I don't believe anybody has free will, and so I can't really accept any praise for any good qualities that I may or may not possess. But yeah, I think one of the reasons for that is because I used to be like that. Like I used to hate education and learning and schooling. I used to hate it. I was a skateboarder. I just push around all day, show up late, not wear my uniform. The first time I did AS levels, I don't know what the American equivalent is if there are American listeners, but the first kind of exams you do that are moderately serious, I got 3 U's. I just completely bunked them. I overslept one of my exams, and that exam was at 1 in the afternoon. It was awful. I just wasn't interested. And then I realized what it was that got me interested in reading a book and engaging with philosophy. And then I made the channel, and then I retook my AS levels and got better grades, and now I go to university, and I have this channel where I talk about philosophy, so I know what it's like to be completely uninterested, and I know the kinds of things that made me want to learn about it. And it wasn't sitting in a classroom having someone tell you about Immanuel Kant. It was someone saying, have you ever thought of what would happen if you took your brain and you split it in 2, and you put one in one body and one in another? Which one would be you? Or like, would you rather kill an innocent person and then immediately forget about it, or not kill an innocent person but live the rest of your life thinking that you had and living with all that guilt? And just interesting questions, and you think like, God, that's intriguing. And you don't think, wow, that's great, I really want to do philosophy now. You don't put it in that box. You just kind of think, that's an interesting question. And as you research it, you're just doing philosophy without realizing it, and then before it's like, by then it's too late. You're already into philosophy.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do about it.
Is that what you're studying at the moment?
Yes, it's a joint honours, philosophy and theology.
Okay. So you got both bases covered there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Just is that sort of like keep your friends close, sort of?
That's exactly what I say when people ask me why I study theology. Is a kind of keeping your enemies closer thing. Because I would do straight philosophy, but they don't offer it at Oxford, so I have to do it with something, and you can do it with like a modern language, or you can do it with physics or something, and I can't do a real subject, so it had to be theology. It seemed to complement it quite well.
I mean, theology is fascinating. It's certainly really interesting, and also it's I keep saying the word enemy, and it sounds too aggressive, but it is, you know, know your enemy. It is how can you feel so passionately about something without learning about it, without knowing about it, and so I totally get why you would go down that road.
There's also a lot of philosophy and theology, isn't
there? Yeah, there is. Yeah, I mean, I guess, I mean, we can talk about this, but I want to talk about Mark Sargent. But sort of, it's all just context and how people read into stuff, and you know, the book is basically the same in almost every religion, but they've all sort of taken their own spin on it. I mean,
there's a big breadth. So there are so many things to cover. One paper we do in theology is a paper on the figure of Jesus, and you can either study.
He is a good figure.
You can that's up for debate in the paper. That's the whole point, right? And you can either do it with
so cut, and he's got.
You can study like
abs. Sorry.
Talking about Jesus.
You can study him in like a theological perspective. You can look at some ancient mystics writing on Jesus, or in the same paper you could do Jesus Christ in Dostoevsky's novels, or you can do Jesus in film, or you can do Jesus in like modern literature generally. So there's so much breadth. You can kind of choose what you want. But you're right. Instead of doing real philosophy, perhaps we should talk about the flat Earth.
Yeah, let's do that. We've got I've got Mark Sargent's Hot 5 here, and I'll kick you off with the first one. What's up?
Before we go into that, how are we doing on that camera? What's the time limit on that?
Got about another 10 minutes.
Okay.
DSLRs, right?
I thought I just ruined that segment.
Well, the EU to thank for that one, you know.
Well, not anymore, mate. Yeah.
Even Americans and people who aren't in the EU have to that. A lot of people don't realise that the whole 30-minute on the DSLR thing is because of silly import taxes, which means that if they film for more than 30 minutes, then they have to put special taxes on them.
2 of my cameras, I think, are American. I bought while I was out in the States, and they have the exact same sort of problem. But we were saying that we'd just pay the tax.
Pay the tax. Just pay it.
Yeah.
It can't be that much, can it? Surely.
I don't know, what, like an extra 20 quid or something?
Yeah, imagine that.
Alright, so Mark kicks off with long distance photography, okay? So his argument is, and he's going to be talking through me.
Yep.
This isn't my opinion. With high definition cameras, we're seeing things in the distance that we shouldn't. So at 50 miles, there's over 1,600 feet, or 1,600 feet if you haven't been in America as much as me, of curvature, according to Mark. So how do you explain that one?
This is according.
We've got him on the ropes.
This is, I don't want to make it look too easy, because I already answered this question the last time we filmed. You say according to Mark, like also according to official sources, according to NASA.
I only said that because I couldn't bother to fact check it.
But like the important point is that this number has come from the very authorities that are supposedly trying to suppress the flat Earth. Now, if it were the case that you could disprove the globular Earth by simply seeing something over the horizon, surely when this number was plucked out of thin air, when this arbitrary number was invented for the curvature, and it must be a made-up arbitrary number because there's no actual curve at all, then when this number was created, it would have been a number that didn't allow for that kind of anomaly. I said before, it's like with moon landing conspiracies, when people would point to things that just would so obviously debunk the moon landing if they were actually accurate, like the fact that there's no stars in the sky in the footage, or the fact that the flag is blowing in the wind. It's like if those things really shouldn't be able to happen in the moon landing, then they would easily debunk the moon landing. Problem is NASA really going to let something like that slip through? Are they really going to look at the footage and think, gosh, there are no stars in the sky, it's fine, I'm sure no one will notice? Like, Of course not. They're going to do everything they can. The fact that there are things that seem to be a bit tricky or a bit that might suggest that there's some falsity there is actually a testament to its truth, because any organization that was trying to successfully cover this stuff up wouldn't let any of that slip through, even if it's just something really tiny. So, like with the moon landing, if you find a really small piece of evidence that suggests there might be something a bit, but it's not even that important, well, it is important because, like I say, NASA wouldn't let anything slip through the cracks. The fact that shadows seem to point in different directions, they would have been on the ball with that. They would have made sure every single thing was perfect if they were faking it. If it's real, then who cares? Just film the footage and show what you actually got. Like, you don't need to worry about whether the shadows are lined up, whether the stars are in exposed, whatever. Yeah, and that's exactly what we'd expect when we see real footage. So similarly, with the curvature of the Earth, if it were that easy to disprove the flat Earth, to disprove the globular Earth, then there's no way that that whoever invented this number would have done it in such a way that allowed that to happen. Secondly, a lot of the time when observations are made that seem to be able to see more over the curve than you should be able to, you're not taking into account the latitude of the observer. So when you have a measurement of like seeing the top of a mountain or something and an observer somewhere else on the curve, it's usually measured from like as if the observer was at sea level, which isn't always the case. If the video that I put out on the Flat Earth before gave a specific claim about a mountain in Hawaii, whereby you could stand at a particular airport and you could look over and see the top of a mountain that you shouldn't be able to see. And the person who made the video I was responding to said, "Here's the maths. Look, take where this person is, how far they are, like their longitude, and do the maths with the curvature and how far away he is from the mountain, and you shouldn't be able to see the mountain." And I just Google searched the distance from sea level that airport was, and that was missing from the equation. Right. And you throw that into the equation, and as you rise up on a globe, you can see further over the curve, and you can easily see what's in the distance. Yeah. The final point is that Mark Sargent talks about boats disappearing off the horizon and being able to zoom back in and find them again. That's only true when the boat has disappeared because it's gotten too small to see. Then you can zoom back in and you can see it. What you will never see is a boat disappearing over the horizon, that is sinking into the ground, which is something that everybody can observe with a decent pair of binoculars. You can go to the beach, watch a boat moving away from the shore, and eventually as it moves away, you'll see it kind of disappear like that. That can only happen on a globe because it's going over the curve. Yeah. If it were really flat, then you would just see it get smaller and smaller and smaller. You'd see it appear to kind of shrink downwards, but the bottom wouldn't kind of go under the.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And also, when it does disappear, it's not like a tiny speck. It's like you can still see the ship, and the ship disappears as this big block. It doesn't kind of shrink into oblivion, which is what you'd expect if you saw, if we were looking on a flat Earth. As well as that, the Earth is not a perfect globe. This is very, very well documented. You can go and look up graphs of like exaggerated, an exaggerated version of the shape of the Earth. So there are certain points on Earth where gravity is stronger than others. I mean, the average across the world is 9.81 meters per second squared acceleration of gravity, but that actually varies depending on where you are, because it varies how far away you are from the center of the Earth. And I'm not just talking about kind of like mountains and valleys. I'm talking like over vast periods, the Earth is kind of this weird, globular but not perfectly spherical object. So it's very possible that in certain areas where the shape of the Earth is kind of one of these weird indentations or there's something kind of sticking out in a way, that you'd be able to see what you wouldn't be able to see on a perfect globe. Now, I don't have an example of that. But that would be able to explain generally instances in which these things occur. So when you can see something that you shouldn't be able to see, it's either going to be because of the height of the observer, or it's going to be because of some kind of mirage which happens. And actually, we talked about that as well, didn't we? Which is there was this famous story. I still can't remember which city it was, but you could see it like an American city. You could see it across a lake or a river or something, or an ocean, whatever it was, and apparently you shouldn't have been able to see it. And the answer was given, well, this is a mirage. And the flat earthers turn around and say, how convenient. It's just a mirage. You can't just say that it's an illusion. Well, the thing is, it's not visible all the time. If the reason why we could see it now was because the earth is flat, then we'd be able to see it every day, and we can't. So the fact that we can only see it in this one particular extraordinary instance indicates that there's a very particular and extraordinary thing going on to allow us to see it, such as a mirage.
Conditions.
Yes. So there are so many ways to explain, and you don't even need to find these convincing, right? You don't need to think, wow, that solves it for me. I totally understand why you can see things I shouldn't be able to see. All I'm saying is that there are many, many, many explanations for why you can see something. It could be the height of the observer. It could be a mirage. It could be like that you're just imagining something like that. It could be whatever you want, and the likelihood is that it's more likely an explanation than the fact that the Earth is flat, right? However, how many hoops you need to jump through to get there, like I can assure you, you need to jump through even more hoops to get to the conclusion that the Earth is flat.
In at number 2 is vacuum versus gravity. So Mark argues that he basically, I'm going to try and say this without laughing, because I worded it in such a way that's so juvenile.
Oh yeah.
How is the vacuum of space not sucking off the atmosphere of the planet?
Okay. Oh, geez. So, look, the vacuums do suck. Like, if you, how can I explain this?
They certainly
look.
do.
Okay. So imagine it this way, right? Imagine that the atmosphere does just get ripped off the world by a vacuum. Imagine somehow, there isn't actually a vacuum in space, but let's turn one on. So all of a sudden, space is actually now a vacuum, and the atmosphere, as Mark Sargent suggested, just gets ripped off. Where does it go? Where does Mark Sargent think that the atmosphere goes?
Well, his argument is that it doesn't. There's nowhere for it to go, and there's no the whole thing doesn't make any sense to him.
So in a vacuum, there's no particular reason why the particles and atmospheric particles should be in one place or should be in another. If space is a vacuum, then you have an atmosphere in a vacuum right now, and all that's happened is because we have a gravitational object, it's been attracted to it. There's no reason why it should be sucked out.
Yeah.
Because it's not like.
But that's it. I guess if we are, let's bring this down to my level for a second. If we are talking about actual vacuums, hoovers, then the dust will sit in the bag somewhere.
Well, that's actually not a bad way of thinking about it. Is that when something is kind of sucked out by a vacuum or sucked up by a vacuum, like it's still there, right? It's still in the vacuum. Now, space is just a big vacuum, and there's lots of things in the vacuum. It would be like asking, why doesn't Earth just get sucked into the vacuum? What are you talking about? Like, it's in the vacuum. The atmosphere is in the vacuum. There's no reason why it should prefer one place over another, except for the fact that maybe there's something like a gravitational pull that makes it kind of sit in one particular area. There's nowhere else for it to go.
He's thinking about it like if you had a spaceship out in space in the vacuum of space, and the window broke. This spaceship's got a lovely window, and it broke. Then you've got one atmosphere of pressure against a vacuum, and so that atmosphere inside the spaceship will leave at the rate of one atmosphere. So not very powerfully. So sometimes you see spaceship sci-fi movies when the hull blows open. It's only really one atmosphere of pressure, so you're not going to get blown out.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, because
strongly.
you can just stick your finger on it and it would.
Yeah, I know. It's a little bit disappointing.
Look, if you open a hatch in space, because you've kind of neutralized the atmospheric environment inside of the spaceship, if you then open a hatch or smash a window, you're getting sucked out of there. You are getting sucked right out.
I'm not sure.
But what happens? Once you're out, if you've got a spaceship and you've got a person just in space in the vacuum, and the person's obviously dead, but just imagine their body; it's the same mass. They will attract each other. And it might happen slowly. It depends how far away they are, how big they are, which way they're moving, everything like that. But they will attract each other, and they will come together. So in a situation like a pressurized cabin and a door is open, yeah, you're going to get sucked out. But like these things are still gravitationally attracted to each other, and they would still end up together in the same way that something might get sucked out into the vacuum of space, but the atmosphere can't be sucked out because it's not in anything. It's not like in some kind of pressurized environment. There's no door to open to have it sucked out. It's just in the vacuum. It's like, why don't the trees, why are we not being sucked into the vacuum of space? If space is a vacuum, then why on earth aren't we being sucked out? Well, it's because we have the atmosphere, but like, imagine the atmosphere wasn't there. It's ridiculous to see. I don't understand, and I watched Mark Sargent make this argument. I don't understand what he thinks the kind of physics of a vacuum are and how it works. And the problem with this all, I think, is that we have a real tendency to think about how the laws of physics work on planet Earth in our environment with our atmosphere. So people, I don't know if you've ever heard the argument of water finding its level or something. It's like water will always find its level. Well, yeah, like on Earth, like the reason why it finds its level is because of gravity, and you put that across a globe and it will find its level around the globe. Like, we're thinking about physics as it applies on planet Earth. We're thinking about physics as we already have gravity, we already have an atmosphere, we already have and we observe like really long periods of flat space. Like, we need to think about how physics works in space, not on planet Earth, because it works in different ways. And if you try to apply the everyday physics of things you can observe on planet Earth to space, it's not going to apply how you want it to.
All right. Do you want to do number 3? What's number 3?
What was number 3? Eclipse shadow. Mark argues that even though the moon is over 2,000 miles wide, the shadow made was only 70 miles wide.
That was in a recent eclipse, a 2017 North American eclipse or something that he observed.
I'm pretty sure.
Now I've just written what he said here.
I've seen maps of the shadow of an eclipse, and it's definitely bigger than 70 miles.
I honestly don't even know what any of those words mean. It just feels like I don't know who's saying any of these things, almost.
Right, so he's suggesting that the shadow should be at least 2,000 miles wide, because
shadow of what?
The shadow of the moon.
The shadow of Earth. The shadow of Earth on the moon, or the shadow of the moon on the Earth?
A solar eclipse. So the moon's going in front of the sun, but between Earth. So we're observing from Earth that the moon's next, and then behind that is the sun. So we're getting the shadow of the moon, and I guess he's suggesting that it should be at least 2,000 miles wide, because that's the width of the moon. That's what I'm understanding.
Okay. Yeah. Go on, Alex.
Wait, hold on. Now, I don't want to like straw man him here, but he thinks that the width of the shadow should be the same width as the moon.
I'd argue that it should be more, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
Depending on how far you are away from the light and how far away the thing that the shadow is landing on. All those things sort of come into the equation. But Mark is arguing that the shadow cast by the moon was only 70 miles wide.
We could probably look that up, to be completely honest.
Yeah. Well, that's...
Yeah. It's probably worth fact checking. I don't know if that's the case. Again, like, I don't think something like this would slip through the cracks. As well as this, think about the concept of eclipses. I know that this is the kind of eclipse where the moon passes between the Earth and the Sun, which, by the way, in most flat Earth models, I don't quite see how that would work.
Mark, when we spoke to him, that was one of my questions, because on that flat Earth model, the Sun and the Moon never meet. They're always exactly opposite from each other, spinning around a tabletop below.
Well, I mean, they can be spinning at different speeds. Like, they don't need to be exactly opposite. They can sometimes pass by each other and be in the same vicinity. But you'd have to have kind of one underneath the other in a very kind of specific manner, which I guess might be possible. But think about the other kind of eclipse, which is a lunar eclipse, where the sun, where the Earth passes between the sun and the moon. Instead of the moon in between the sun and the earth, it's the earth in the middle. And so you get a red... You get like a red moon because of this kind of faint shadow of planet Earth. Now, that definitely shouldn't work because you need to have the Earth in between the sun and the moon. So the sun would have to kind of go underneath the flat Earth.
Was a little bit disappointing. I think he said it was along the lines of like a LED screen, like an LCD screen. So it was an actual.
He said that the moon was self-eclipsing, and I didn't want to press him on that. Self-eclipsing
was
as in like we've got an LED light here, and it's.
He
like
then started talking about basement lights. Sorry,
just interrupted.
That looks like they're basement skylights that move or something.
No, he was talking about lights that mimic the same sort of UV profile as the sun. That was all that was about. But yeah, it's
okay. Look, why bother? Like, why bother with any of that? You don't have to have it. Like, why would you just invent this extraordinary astronomical event and find some kind of way to fake it?
Yeah.
You could just you don't have to do that. Yeah, I don't, man. But the thing is, like, self-eclipsing.
Yeah,
so
I was
don't.
trying to explain it. We've got an LED, like array of LED lights as a spotlight here, and I think he was suggesting that would have, like a digital display, would have mimicked the way that it would look.
So from left to right, each of those the bulbs would have gone out and then reappeared.
That's what he was getting at, but
again, I mean, Alex's argument.
Why bother?
The point?
Thing is that and look, the maths lines up. The maths tells us exactly when these eclipses are going to occur. Like, can the flat earther come up with any kind of scientific prediction of when these eclipses are going to occur with the level of accuracy that we can with the globular Earth theory? If you deny gravitational motion and motion of the planets as we understand them, like one of the reasons why we know that our theories are correct, the only way we know that a theory is correct is by its confirmation with future events. That's what science is. It's making predictions about the future and seeing if they're confirmed. And the understanding of the universe that we have allows us to make very accurate predictions about things like solar eclipses and lunar eclipses. And it all makes perfect sense. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. Like, it could be, for instance, there's a famous shadow stick experiment that was one of the original means by which the ancients worked out the circumference of the planet. They put a stick and measured its shadow, and they measured a shadow at another point of the Earth, and they took the difference in the length of the shadow, because that would, depending on where the sun is and the angle that it's coming at, the shadows are a different length, and they worked out the distance between them, the difference in the shadow, and how big the circle was. That experiment actually also works on a flat Earth, because the angle would still be different. If you move far enough away and the sun's up here, the angle's still different, and you can still do the same maths, right? So the theory that the Earth is a globe and has gravity and etc., you don't need to necessarily accept it. We know that it works. Now, if you can present a theory of flat Earth that also works, then good for you. I don't think you can, because there are major flaws in it. But if you can, then fine. But then what we have, at the very best for the flat Earther, are two competing hypotheses. You've got either the Earth is a globe or the Earth is flat, and both work, but you've got to figure out which one's the right one. So you take, on the one hand, the theory that is backed up by maths and science, as well as scientific authorities who have absolutely no reason to lie. On the other hand, you have to believe in this massive conspiracy that all the authorities of the world have all gotten together in a around a table or something and just decided to make this lie. Like, you would have to believe that is more probable or more likely or better an explanation than the other option we have over here, which I don't think you can as a reasonable person.
The flat Earth, if it was a flat Earth, it's been designed to look and work like a globe. Like, why bother with with stars and the planetary movements and the because of the ultimate power.
Because of the power.
So I guess I guess this person that made the flat Earth has made it to look exactly and work exactly like a globular Earth.
It's a lot of work, isn't it?
It's a lot of faff. Just make it round.
Yeah.
Just be round.
Yeah, they've got a lot of thought into it. Should we move on to the next point? Go on, then.
No, I'll do it, shall I?
Yeah.
So moon temperature. We've got more moon stuff. Apparently, the moon generates a cold light. This is Mark's words. Don't know what it is. Opposite to the sun, it is cooler in the moonlight than it is in the moon shade.
So in the sun, you stand in the sun, you get warm. You go in the shade, you get a bit cooler. The moon behaves oppositely, apparently.
Oh, he's suggesting at night time, the moon's shining, as you know.
It's cooler than being in the shade. But when he said that, I don't know whether he actually means that if it's a completely clear night and the moon is shining and you stand under a tree.
Right.
I don't know whether he's talking about that or whether he's talking about the difference between
like an overcast
and a clear light.
Yeah.
Which I learned in primary school that it's a little blanket.
That's a little blanket. Keeps it all nice and warm.
That's why deserts freezing at night.
Yeah. No little blanket.
But also,
don't know.
Not being funny, but what's this got to do with flat Earth? Like, I mean, maybe I'm just missing something. But like, okay, so let's just say that the moon emits a cold light. Okay. What?
Oh God!
Like,
but
what next?
No.
I don't know if I'm just missing something here. Maybe it just plays into the narrative that we're being lied to about the true nature of the moon or something, whatever. But like, it doesn't do anything for us. And yeah, like, I mean, I don't know if that's true. I don't quite know how you would test that successfully. Is that? I mean, Is there a good way to test that? I don't know. I guess it also depends on the discrepancy, because I'd imagine like it's a really tiny difference that he's talking about. That's very difficult to measure. Certainly not something that we experience. But I guess because the moon is supposed to reflect the sun's light. Actually, I think I remember him saying this. Did I get this far when he said, "Well, look, the moon is supposed to reflect the sun's heat, so you'd expect it to be hot"? Well, not quite. So it's reflecting both light and heat. Thing is, the moon is incalculably small, well, not incalculably, but unthinkably smaller than the sun is. It's just a hell of a lot closer. So they appear about the same size in the sky to us, but the moon is unbelievably smaller than the sun is. So it's kind of just this like tiny rock that's way further away than people think it is. Like if you hold if my fist here was the Earth, and you ask people if the Earth was this size, where do you think the moon would be? And they say maybe like, I don't know, here or so.
I know, I've seen pictures
it's like way out here.
I blame science books in school for that thing, because I was under the impression the moon was a lot closer, and then you do see a picture and it's well far. Yeah, it's well far away.
It's because human beings aren't able to comprehend those kinds of distances. It's not possible. Like if I tell you, it's kind of like if I tell you to imagine, imagine 10 footballs like sat on a football pitch or something. Like, yeah, okay, that's easy enough. Now I tell you to imagine 100, you can probably do that, or 1,000. If I tell you to imagine 1,000,000 footballs,
yeah,
it gets a bit blurry. And if I ask you to imagine 1,000,000,000 footballs, you definitely can't do it. Like, if I say imagine 1,000,000,000 footballs and imagine 2,000,000,000 footballs, like you've probably got the same image in your head. Like numbers are just so out there that there's no distinction between them. Even though that there's a massive, unbelievable difference between them. We're not able to really understand that. The moon's tiny. Like any heat that it emits it pales in comparison. It doesn't even emit it. That's the thing. It pales in comparison to the sun, because the sun is actually emitting heat. Whereas the moon is absorbing a lot of it and reflecting a little bit. The moon actually isn't that reflective. If you're on the surface, if you see like images from the surface, it's just kind of grey like granite. Right. It's got about the same reflectivity as granite. It's not some kind of mirror in the sky that's reflecting all of this heat. It's absorbing the majority of it, but because although it's tiny on a cosmic scale, it's big in terms of the things we usually see in the sky. it's big enough that that tiny amount of reflectivity across the whole surface gives us quite a bright light overall, because it's like, yeah, it's not very reflective, but it's a large surface, so it's gonna appear fairly bright to us. But its actual capabilities to reflect light and heat are not as much as perhaps people would think.
So that's probably why it looks quite bright.
Yeah. That's the thing. So the only reason that we're able to see it being lit up by the sun is because of the light that's being reflected onto planet Earth. But it's not. People think of the moon as some kind of mirror, because it's like this really bright, like crazy object. It must be like reflecting all of this light. It's just a rock. It's just reflective. It's not actually that reflective at all. It's just because it's this big body in the sky that it seems to be quite bright, because the tiny reflective power is magnified across the whole surface. But it still is like not very reflective at all.
There's nothing else. There's no other light source out there.
Yeah, I mean, you must have seen. You'll have seen when the moon and the sun are out at the same time. When the moon's out in daytime, and you almost like can't see it. Like it looks like this faded grey smudge in the sky. Because, like you say, it is just unbelievably outcompeted. I wonder if Mark Sargent thinks that it's slightly warmer or like slightly colder on days when the moon is out at the same time as the sun is, because
it's warmer in my house. It's colder under the moonlight. That is probably not the case.
I'm interested actually. I do wonder if because when the moon and the sun are out at the same time, I wonder if Mark Sargent thinks that the Earth's surface is on average slightly colder when the moon is out with the sun, because the moon is emitting this cold temperature. I don't even understand how that would work. Like how you would emit a cold temperature from a rock. Like I don't know. But either way, like I say, it doesn't do anything for the flat Earth model. It really doesn't.
It's relevant, but it is. These are his questions that he put to. I think it was a group of scientists in Germany. I think he did like a live cast with them, and he had a body of scientists that couldn't answer these questions.
I'm not surprised.
They shut the thing down. They said, no, we're not discussing this any further.
Well, yeah, it's. I heard him say that. It's like to me that sounds like somebody wanting to debate. I don't know, wanted to debate somebody like an evolutionary biologist or something. And the evolutionary biologist says, yeah, great, I'd love to talk about evolution. Like, what is it you want to debate? Do you want to debate, like, this particular specificity versus this particular specificity? And then the opponent goes, oh, no, I want to debate whether or not creationism is true. I think the Earth was created in 6 days by an all-powerful God, and that evolution is a lie. The evolutionary biologist would probably be like, right. Oh, yeah, no thanks, I'm not doing that. Right, so this is probably what's happened here. I can't be certain, but it wouldn't surprise me if when they heard Mark Sargent's argument, they didn't say, "Gosh, those are too tricky. I can't handle that. I need to pull out." But just, I'm not wasting my time on it.
And finally, Mark talks about the Van Allen radiation belt. Which it's recognised, I think, as sort of quite potentially deadly. And he says, how did the Apollo missions, how did they happen with aluminium, and plastic protecting the crew from that radiation without anyone dying of radiation poisoning. Well, he's just saying that there's no space. He's arguing. That not just the Earth's flat, but all of that. That's where it ends. There's no space, and he's also claiming that there's too much radiation.
Is there even a Van Allen belt in the flat Earth model? There, I thought he said it's not. Globe.
No, there's not. But he's saying, if the Earth's not flat and there's this radiation that's just outside, how on earth did these Apollo missions happen?
Yeah, there are a few things to say, which are firstly, again, surely if if put yourself in the shoes of the person who knows the Earth is flat and has to convince the world that the Earth is a globe. You've already had to come up with so much crap in order to convince people that the Earth is a globe. You have to make up a bunch of stuff about the sun and eclipses and aberrations and everything. That it wouldn't be difficult to find some kind of way to just not include the Van Allen belts. But why would you do that? Why would you let people know that they were a thing? They were only discovered in the 1950s. The Van Allen belt. I mean, why would you do that? Just leave it out. And bear in mind that was before the moon landing. It's not like when the astronauts traveled through, we didn't know what the Van Allen belt was, and then we learned what the Van Allen belt was, and now we're like, oh, whoops, that doesn't really work with our previous story. Like, no. They knew what the Van Allen belt was before they sent the astronauts to the moon. They knew the risks. They were just willing to take the risk, and they just thought that because they're moving so quickly through the Van Allen belt, that they wouldn't be there enough time to actually suffer any kind of damage. Although perhaps there may have been a risk that would happen, but it's like, going to the moon is a risky business. There are risks that you're going to have to take, and that's one of them. You can find I'm just pulling up articles on this to back myself up here. There's a lot of information about it. So, for instance, apparently it was in 1964 that NASA became confident that, I'll quote, that the Apollo crews would be passing through the belts fast enough that if the spacecraft skin and all the instrumentation lining the walls would be enough protection. It seems. Yes, it might seem foolhardy in hindsight for NASA to have accepted the risks of sending astronauts through the Van Allen belts without extra protection, but it was a minor risk in the scheme of the mission. So, yeah, it's dangerous. Like, no one's denying it's dangerous, but it's not the kind of level of dangerous that's being proposed. Like, there are more recent stories where people say that we can't go into the Van Allen belt. Well, it's true. We can't, hang around there. It's this radioactive zone. We don't want to go and, have dinner there or anything but if you just zip through it in order to get to the moon, it's perfectly possible. It's been done. And like I say, if someone was trying to fake this, then they just wouldn't let you know. It's not even like they wouldn't let you know about the Van Allen belts, because they wouldn't exist. They just wouldn't. Yeah, why are you making up something that seems to disprove the moon landing or something like that? And also, again, if the Van Allen belts were really as dangerous as the flat earthers say that they are, then surely there would be some great explanation, because, like I say again, NASA aren't letting anything slip through the cracks. They're not going to just think, well, yes, somebody might realise that the Van Allen belts wouldn't allow us to get to the moon, but let's just hope nobody really brings it up. No, they're going to have an answer. They're going to be like, oh, well, we discovered and invented this special lead lining that's super lightweight and doesn't weigh down the spacecraft and allows us to safely pass through. They would have come up with some kind of explanation, right? They would have found a way to get around it. But what do they actually say when you ask them about the Van Allen belts? They go well, yeah, I mean, we just kind of went through. It was a bit risky, but we did it. Does that sound like the language of somebody who's trying to pull off one of the greatest hoaxes in human history? I don't think so.
The notion of the Apollo missions, surely he must think that they were faked anyway.
Well, yeah, no, he doesn't. He doesn't believe in space, but then he was also talking to me about UFOs at one point, which it confused me.
Oh yeah.
I let it go. But I was I couldn't understand how there was no space, but he also believed in UFOs.
Was it interdimensional? Was it something?
Is that what he said? Do you reckon?
Maybe like a Rick and Morty teleporter.
But it was interesting. They're his points. That's so. Are you still? Are you not convinced?
I mean, not quite. I'll give it a bit more thought. But the thing is, it's not just about debunking arguments in favour of the flat Earth. There are also arguments specifically against it. For instance, the arguments that we've gone through about boats disappearing across the horizon and things. But also consider that this is an interesting point that I came across fairly recently, which is that if you think about the shape of the Earth, Antarctica has to be essentially an ice wall. I don't know if this is Mark Sargent's particular view. You have to have a big wall of ice right now. What happens if somebody tries to go to Antarctica? The story is, from the flat earthers, they get stopped. They get stopped by the police, and they get stopped from going and investigating. They're not allowed. Now, okay, think about this. How big is the ice wall? If the ice wall is around the entire planet, and we know the distance from the North Pole to Antarctica, and we can work out like spherically how big the ice wall would have to be to cover an entire flat Earth, it's big enough that if you had, let's say you had one patrol boat, as in police patrol boat, every kilometer, like an entire kilometer between every single boat, to patrol the ice border and make sure no one was getting through, you would need something like 100,000 boats. And then you'd need 100,000 people to man those boats, and you probably need a crew on those boats. You probably need one or two people. So you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who are manning these boats. Where are these boats being made? Who's making them? Who's manning them? Like, where are these jobs? Like, are all of these people sworn to secrecy? Like, it's just not. It doesn't. Of course, it's possible. It's possible that there are these boats that are being secretly produced and are kind of filling the oceans, and that these people are either sworn to secrecy or completely ignorant of their own job, even though they're told that they have to just arrest anybody who goes anywhere near Antarctica, not told why. And okay, this is possible, or we just live on a globe. And it is up to the listener to decide what they think. There are loads of problems with the mathematics of the Earth. If you think about the fact that, so you know how if you do like a circle, so if you walk from London all the way around the Earth to London, that would be less distance than walking along the equator. If you walked from Panama back to Panama, because it's bigger, so it's longer to walk. But with the flat Earth, the further south you go, the more that distance increases. For us, it's smaller at the top, like UK to UK. It's bigger in the middle, like Panama to Panama, and then when you get down to the bottom, like to Australia, it's smaller again, because you're kind of at the bottom of the globe. For the flat Earth, it has to get even bigger, and this kind of distorts the way that we should think about things. So, for instance, we know how far Australia is from the North Pole. There's a good video actually by, I think his name on YouTube is something like Cool Hard Logic, and he's made this video called something like Testing Flatards, and he calls them flatards. What can you do? But he makes some interesting mathematical points about the fact that we can calculate. We know how wide Australia actually is, because you can just measure it yourself, and you know how long it takes to fly there and everything. Like the width of the country, I mean. But that doesn't line up with the mathematics of this kind of distorted, this distorted, as you're getting bigger, everything getting wider. It would need to be a hell of a lot wider, essentially. The mathematics would work out that Australia would need to be about 8,000 kilometers across for the flat Earth model to work. As well as, for instance, flying from Sydney to Johannesburg is another point that he brings up. It's done daily. People take direct flights from Australia to South Africa, and on a globe we can see how long that journey would be on a globe, and we can calculate what speed we'd have to be if we're moving at a certain speed, how long it would take us to get there, and that lines up exactly with what we see. On a flat Earth, you wouldn't be kind of just going over a globe. You'd be going around this perimeter of this massive flat Earth, and it would be like double the distance. You'd need double the fuel. It would take double the time, or you'd need to be going double the speed, and it just doesn't line up with what we see in reality. So again, you would have to find some way to explain the fact that on the flat Earth model that's being presented, the distance between these points would be far longer than we can actually just observe by getting in an aeroplane. And again, like, that's not a great overview, because I haven't given you the numbers there. I haven't given you the maths. So don't take my word for it. Go and watch his video, and he'll actually show you the maths. This is more just me pointing out that does exist, and I'd recommend you go and watch it. Like, don't take my word for it. But if he's right, then we've got a big spanner in the works, as if there weren't enough already. It's like having an interesting fictional story. If there were a film, if there were no 9/11 conspiracy, if there was no such thing, and somebody just invented this novel in which they invented the story that there was this big government conspiracy about it. Like, I'd find that interesting. I'd read that book. Like, it'd be an interesting fiction. That's one of the reasons people love conspiracies, because they're really interesting. But they also have this element of perhaps truth to them. It's like reading the Da Vinci Code and then thinking, oh gosh, this is interesting. It kind of lines up with elements of truth. Like, it's great. But that's why I think people are willing to buy into these things.
But I'd say with that argument, I'd say that's why I don't get the flat Earth thing at all. Because I love a conspiracy theory. I just think they're just sort of...
They are fun.
They're fun and interesting, and just a bit more. Like I say, just a bit more interesting than what is the actual probable boring narrative. But when I look at sort of like 9/11, could it be an inside job? Well, George Bush would really benefit from war, and it sort of echoes Pearl Harbor in a way. And was that an inside job? And then you go, oh yeah, well that's possible. It's not like completely out of the realms of what.
Yeah, or like faking the moon landing. Like there are motives there. You could understand why it might have been done, how it might have been done. But
the Cold War
with the flat Earth,
like this, but who's winning? who's
No, I'll tell you who's winning. Mark Simon's winning because he gets to hang out. He's a big fish in a little pond with another sexy little fish. This isn't going in the... This is not going on. He's a big fish in a little pond, and he's making money, and he's getting on with ladies.
Good luck to him, I suppose. But that was it. That was Alex. He's debunking.
He debunked hard.
Debunked all over Mark Sargent's face. But thanks for that. Thanks for So it turns out last podcast I thought the Earth was flat. Turns out I was wrong again. I've been wrong both times.
Can't believe
First of all, I thought it was round. Then I was told it was flat, and when I started thinking it was flat, and now it's round again.
Maybe it's neither. Maybe it just doesn't exist, or something. Maybe it's the shape of a banana. Who knows?
Well, I'm going to definitely look up what you were saying earlier about like it being sort of like a lumpy, bumpy sort of. I was imagining like as if a little bit of porridge had a gravitational pull. That was sort of what was going in my head when you were talking about it. Not a perfect sort of smooth sphere, but sort of...
I think I know what you mean. Yeah, I know what you mean. And it's because like gravitationally, the reason why all big celestial objects like planets and things are globular is because the laws of gravity state that if you have something like a body of mass that's big enough, then its own gravity will just collapse under its own gravity and will have to form into a sphere. So the reason why the Earth is a sphere is because when the solar system is being created and there's just rocks flying around, they're all colliding and they're collapsing under their own gravity and being attracted. It's just little clumps of rock that are kind of sticking together. And so you wouldn't expect this perfect sphere. It's not like it's been cut out or formed in any way. It's just kind of come together. It's like getting a bunch of rocks and just chucking enough of them together, and once it gets big enough, it seems from a distance to be fairly smooth, like the surface, because there's so many and it's so big. But it's actually this kind of bumpy mess. So yeah, worth checking out.
That's good. Yeah, I like that. What's in the immediate future for you, Alex? Because I know that you're studying. I know that you go all over the
yeah.
Being sort of a special guest speaker at certain sort of events and things as well, which is must be incredibly exciting. Have you got coming
very fun? I'm actually, it's exam term now. As soon as I got back from Texas, it was like I had an essay due and exams to do, and I've got exams at the end of June. So essentially, I'm kind of locking down for that. I'll be doing bits and bobs. I'll maybe do some podcast episodes and videos and things, but I don't think I'm doing anything too crazy in the run-up to exams because I want to be able to focus on them. But after that, I want to do some traveling. There's a possibility that I'll be going to, I think, maybe Finland. I might be doing something in Cambridge. I might do something in... there's an event happening in Amsterdam with the ex-Muslims of the the British Council of Ex-Muslims, or it's called something like that I might go along to. Just showing my face at events that I support and trying to be there to engage. But unfortunately, in the meantime, there's really not much coming up. Footage-wise, I've got some podcast episodes coming out. I've got footage from a few debates that I've done recently coming out on both my channel and somebody else's. But people can find all that stuff on my Twitter and YouTube and everything. So yeah, it's more of the same.
Okay, and what about the long-term plans? Because you're studying now, but where do you see? Is there a
yeah? It depends how well it goes. I know that sounds like an obvious thing to say, but I mean, if I come out of university at the end of my 3-year degree with like a 2.2 or something, then I'll probably call it quits, say that was fun, I'm glad I learned something, and then just do YouTube. However, if I get a 2.1 or a first by some miracle, then there's a possibility I'd like to do a master's and then maybe even a PhD. It kind of depends where my academic learning takes me. But if I'm still interested, I'll take it as far as it can go. I'd love to get some kind of doctoral certificate so that when I am sat on a debate stage next to an expert in the theological field that we're debating, I'm not just some YouTuber, but I'm, a guy with a PhD in the subject. Because right now, when I'm talking about it, it's just... I've got no reason to be there other than the fact that some people like listening to me online. I'd like to have a bit more academic, a bit more of an academic buttress to what I'm doing.
Well, it certainly doesn't hurt in any sort of whatever road you want to go down. I certainly am a testament to someone who wishes that they were possibly better educated. But it's
what a time to be alive. I mean, it's very easy to become educated, whoever you are, whatever you're doing. Like that's one of the great things. It's like, yeah, I'm very lucky to be going to university, but if I wasn't, I'd still be learning the same stuff. University, at least at Oxford, I don't know if it's the same everywhere, but it's essentially just being handed a reading list. Like my tutor will just email me, just read these books and these chapters and then write an essay on it. And yeah, you get the benefit of having them go through the essay with you, but the actual knowledge is just from the reading. And you can find these books, especially the classics, like classic philosophical texts and things, for free online, ebook versions. You can download them onto a Kindle or you can read them in your browser. Like, gee, I mean, what a time to be alive. It's so easy to do the reading, to engage in the debates, to watch YouTube videos and to watch debates and to even be part of those debates. Like, you don't need to be going to university. And that's why I wouldn't be so concerned if I didn't carry on my academic journey, if I left after getting my undergraduate degree, because the education doesn't need to stop there.
Of course. Do you feel that there's a book in you at some point?
I'd like to think so. I'm not quite sure what. There's a lot of things that I want to talk about. I'm not sure what I'd want to be the first thing to put my name to, but it might be a book on ethics, which be difficult to get a publisher because it's not the kind of book that would sell very well. I may even just self-publish it, put it online or something, but if there's one thing that I really would like to put out into the academic world, rather than just kind of in my bubble on YouTube, it would be something on ethics, I think.
Okay.
I'm thinking, I think if I wrote a book, it'd probably be called The Good Delusion, and it would be about concepts of good and bad and why they're not like what they've traditionally thought to be.
Yeah.
That's a great title. You shouldn't have put that out.
Well, I've already given talks with that title, so that's a kind of form of copyright, I guess.
You've coined it.
Yeah, it's you can prove that you own the IP to that title. But thank you so much for telling us why the Earth isn't flat. You can make sure that you go and check out Alex's YouTube channel because it's so good. And is your Twitter also Cosmic Skeptic?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can follow him on Twitter as well because it is I've been watching. I think it's been a couple of years I've been watching your channel. It's definitely been over a year and a half.
Right. Wow.
And it has I don't want to put any pressure on you, but it has been sporadic. Since sort of the summer of last year.
Yeah.
So I would also suggest to follow Alex on Twitter as well, because then you'll know when stuff comes out. But thank you so much. You've been a brilliant guest, and I'm so thrilled that I finally got to have you on the channel. And I'll also, if it's all right with you, I'm going to sort of send you a message because I'd like to know a bit more about those books and those texts that you read, and maybe talk about something that someone like me could maybe a little sort of gateway book to help me out.
Oh yeah,
I'd love to know what's your thoughts about that. But yeah, no, thank you ever so much, Alex.
Yeah, well, thanks. It's been a pleasure. It's been really good fun. I've actually I've really enjoyed this because it's such a fun topic to talk about. You can treat it fairly frivolously, so it's been enjoyable. So thanks for having me.
No, thank you.
Awesome. Good luck with your studies, Alex.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, well there was Alex. This is us doing an outro now, and I just looked over at the audio recorder and it's shut off for some reason. So I've got a feeling that a lot of the audio from this podcast would have been taken just from the camera microphone, which probably won't be great, but you should still be able to hear it, and also it would just be as interesting, but it just won't be as nice on the old ear holes.
Yeah, well, we don't want to break the tradition of having terrible audio, do we?
No, we don't want the podcast to sound nice.
Exactly. It's not like the most important part of the old podcast and the old audio, is it?
No, it's not. We'll get it. Listen, we'll get it right. I mean, the one with Mark, the camera didn't work for a bit of it. This one with Alex, the audio's not worked. So now, next guest we have on, if we have him on Skype, it's going to be fucking perfect.
Well, I look forward to that.
You can subscribe to the old Twitch channel if you'd like to, or follow it at least, because I'm over there quite a lot at the moment, and I think we're going to have a little muck about on it now, are we, Matt?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, join us. Come join us.
Well, I mean,
you're not going to be able to write this.
This is the past for you now watching this. I'm just really feeling really dejected because of is dejected the right word? I'm just fucked off because the audio thing turned itself off.
You upset yourself because you're an incompetent fool.
No, I didn't do anything. I left it. I just leave it running.
Right. Is there a timer on it?
I don't know if.
Did you maybe turn it off when you picked it up? God, that would be good, wouldn't it?
Maybe. But yeah, make sure you follow us both on Twitter and Instagram. I think you'll find Matt's stuff in the description box as well as mine.
Go on.
And we'll be back with proper audio on the 24th of June. So it's the last Monday of every month, and I'll have a chat with you as soon as I turn that camera off about when's a good day to do that.
I'll be on holiday on that day that it comes out, so
might have to do it pretty soon. Alright, but I want to do it because we're on a roll.
Yeah, let's not drop one.
January, February, March, April, May. This is 5 months in a row that we've done.
Incredible stuff.
If we do June, that's half a year.
I know, it's good going.
And it's only one a month.
I know.
I find it difficult to commit to that.
It's crazy how difficult we're finding it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I can't stop thinking about how I'm going to have to edit this and try and rescue this audio somehow.
All right, well let's do that right now.
It's killing me. I'm going to sign off, as is Matt.
I'll just stay here.
So yeah, follow the Twitch channel, twitch.tv/completely mate. There'll be another one of these podcasts out the last Monday of June. Matt will be on holiday, so if you want to, we'll talk about that on the next podcast.
Yeah.
But huge thank you for his time to Alex, who's just, I think he's brilliant, and you should definitely if you're watching this, then you'll definitely like his channel because there's actual entertaining, interesting stuff. So give it a go. And
he's got audio.
And the audio there, you can hear everything.
Yeah.
You can absolutely hear everything. So yeah, thank you for listening. Sorry about the audio. Sorry about being rubbish. We'll try harder next time. We're off.
Adios.